With the ringing of our peace bowl, we send collective wishes for healing to our divided country with the hopes that peace, respect, and dignity will surround our democratic voting process. May the democratic principles upon which our country was founded be honored, respected, and held up for the guiding lights that they are and always have been.
Shining light, I like a shining light, will brighten the world, will brighten the world. Like a shining light, like a shining light, I like a shining light, will brighten the world, will brighten the world. Brighten the lonely with friendship, brighten the painful with comfort, brighten the anger with calmness, brighten despair with hope, brighten the taking with giving, brighten the doubting with trusting, brighten the evil with goodness, brighten the hatred with love. Like a shining light, like a shining light, I like a shining light, will brighten the world, will brighten the world. Like a shining light, 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 will brighten the world, will brighten the world, brighten the world. Like a shining light, 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 will brighten the world, will brighten the world. Brighten the lonely with friendship, brighten the painful with comfort, brighten the anger with calmness, brighten despair with hope, brighten the taking with giving, brighten the doubting with trusting, brighten the evil with goodness, brighten the hatred with love. Like a shining light, 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 will brighten the world, will brighten the world, will brighten the world. Shining light, like a shining light, will brighten the world, 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 will brighten the
Welcome to everyone who's here and to all of your smiling faces on Zoom. See some people here we haven't had in a while. That's wonderful. Welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation, where love and community are at the heart of each service. I'm Bobby Bollinger, serving as your worship associate this morning. It is good to be together. It's wonderful seeing so many familiar faces, and I do believe I see some people we haven't seen before. We're very happy to have Jan and author Jeter back after a long absence. Are there any people who are here for the first time who would be comfortable standing and introducing yourselves? Yes. Okay, this is Hannah, who's from Phoenix, and she's up visiting her parents, who just moved here last week, and the parents are?
I'm Ann, and this is Thomas. We actually are from Lexington, Kentucky,
Well, small Unitarian Universalist world. Well, how about that? For those of you on Zoom, they live in the same apartment complex with Roger, just having moved here from Lexington, Kentucky. You can't make this stuff up.
In a very rural community in Kentucky, the Bible Belt. So we feel so grateful.
Thank you. It's
Like I'm at home.
great. Well, it's lovely to have you here. Thank you. Can anyone follow that act? Okay. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Good morning. My name is Lisa. I'm from Seattle, Washington. Our daughter went to Embry-Riddle, and we came to Embry Bucket, and so we had a townhouse, and we come down here part of the year. And so it was important today. I'd be somewhere where I felt more comfortable. I go to Community Lutheran in Seattle, but just look on the website. It's really good.
Glad to have you here. This is Lisa from Seattle, who has a son at Embry-Riddle and is down visiting. Hope you'll come back and see us again. Well, after the service, we will be having coffee and lively conversation in Davis Hall. We hope you visitors will join us for that. And all of you Zoom people can have lively conversation among yourselves in the breakout room. In our work and ministry here at Granite Peak, we utilize the principles of our mission statement, which are as follows. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. We give abundant thanks, as always this morning, to our superb pianist, Lena Hubin, our choir director, Karen Denny, the fabulous Granite Peak singers, Martin at our soundboard, and all of our weekly volunteers. You make the wheels go around on Sunday morning, and we couldn't do it without you. And just a quick reminder to please put your phones on worship mode if you haven't already done that. There are numerous ways to learn about the goings-on at our congregation. Information is available on our website at prescottuu.org. All of the weekly news that's fit to print is in our weekly Peak newsletter, and more can be found in our monthly newsletter, The View, copies of which are on the welcome table in the foyer. We have a nursery in this building for children under the ages of 5. And children over 5 are being taught by our Children's Faith Development Coordinator, Sandra Palacios, across the street. Kids there engage in hands-on activities such as crafts, making food, and Sandra makes each of the lessons very fun. If you haven't been across the street to see the garden, the classroom, or the kids' playground, go take a peek out at some time. Good things are happening over there. And now we have a very special presentation from the membership team. Paula?
We both are sort of shy about speaking, so Kathleen may not speak, but up to her. Yes. Oh, okay, sorry, Briggy. Okay, I'm going to read just something, a little bit of what the membership committee wanted to tell Kathleen, and I think it echoes what the congregation feels about Kathleen. We want to thank you for your many years of time and talent and energy and the devotion you've given to the membership committee, to new and prospective new members of GPUC, and to our community at large. You have continued to make us a warm and welcoming committee. And I would add that Kathleen has always been usually at the front door, welcoming, making people come in, feel welcome and wanted and returning. Kathleen has done the membership table, what was that called? The welcome table. The welcome table, that's really nice. And done our information classes and so many things that I really couldn't list them. So Kathleen, we appreciate you. We will miss you as you go to New York. We know that you'll find a church home, a congregation there, and know that we send our love with you.
Thank you. Just want to say thank you to everybody. And for those of you that are new and visiting here today, you're in the right place. This is such a wonderful, welcoming congregation, and it's meant the world to me. It's been I call it my church family. I'm going to miss terribly, of course, but I've been honored to be a member here for almost 14 years. It's been wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paula and Kathleen. We will truly miss you, Kathleen. We now join with Unitarian Universalist congregations all over the world in the tradition of lighting our chalice. Our chalice lighter this morning is Marianne Clark. May these words from Helen Keller be reflected in the chalice light. I am only one, but I am still one. I cannot do everything, but I can still do something. And because I cannot do everything, I will not refuse to do the something I can do.
We're going to do as our opening words a responsive reading, which is also in our hymnal number 576, although I did change the ending slightly. Your parts are under congregation. There are no books. Oh. All right, it should all be on the screen. If we recognize the interdependence of all life, we strive to build community. The strength we gather will be our salvation. If you are black and I am white, it will not matter. If you are female and I am male, it will not matter. If you are older and I am younger, if you are progressive and I am conservative, it will not matter. If you are straight and I am gay, it will not matter. If you are Christian and I am Jewish, it will not matter. If we join spirits as brothers and sisters, the pain of our aloneness will be lessened, and that does matter. In this spirit, we build community and move towards restoration. In this spirit, let's worship together. Let's sing our opening hymn, Morning Has Broken.
Like the first morning, blackbird has flown.
Love is the doctrine of this congregation.
Its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve others in community. Thus do we covenant together.
Beloved community is one of the things that draws us together each week here at Granite Peak. It facilitates bonds of trust, friendship, shared values, and senses of purpose. In sharing some of our most heartfelt experiences with one another, we can offer support and caring during times of personal joys and difficult concerns. Let us now share a quiet moment of meditation and music and give space to acknowledge the joys and concerns of our hearts and minds. In doing so, you may come forward silently if you wish and drop a pebble in one of our 2 bowls into our communal water. Let the ripples be an affirmation of our connection to one another and the support offered here. May all know that their joys and concerns are acknowledged and supported in spirit by us all. So may it be.
I breathe in When I breathe out, I breathe in love. When I breathe in, I breathe out. 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 When I breathe in, I breathe out.
Our weekly offering supports the programs, staff, and operating expenses of our congregation. We donate to Granite Peak because this congregation has significant meaning in our lives. We also give back to our greater community each month through our Seeds of Support program. November's recipient is the Prescott Martin Luther King Peace and Justice March and Celebration, which will be held on Monday, January the 15th. This year's theme is Love in Action. Attendees will gather at Prescott College that morning. We'll march downtown around the courthouse square, ending up at the Prescott United Methodist Church for a program of dynamic speakers, music, and festivities honoring Dr. King. The online link for giving is on our website at prescottuu.org. The offering will now be taken. Thank you, Lena. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through this offering. What is given in love is received with gratitude. Blessed be. And Robert Shagog, let me know that the information we had about the Martin Luther King March was incorrect.
I apologize, being on that committee, I should have gotten that information to you. This year's march is on January 20th, and not the 15th.
Okay.
Unfortunately, that is also Inauguration Day.
The information that Robert gave is that the Martin Luther King Day will be on January the 20th instead of the 15th, and that is Inauguration Day, so we're all going to be very busy.
Okay, it's also my birthday, Robert. Every 4 years, they have a big parade in Washington to celebrate. Many people have written short wisdom sayings that divide the human race into two groups. These sayings can be divided into two groups, the humorous and the serious. Here are some examples of both. Indira Gandhi is supposedly said, "My grandfather once told me that there were two kinds of people, those who do the work and those who take the credit. He told me to try to be in the first group. There was much less competition." Robert Frost. "There are two kinds of people, some willing to work and the rest willing to let them." Oscar Wilde. "There are only two kinds of people who are really fascinating. People who know absolutely everything and people who know absolutely nothing." Oliver Wendell Holmes. "People can be divided into two classes, those who go ahead and do something and those who sit still and inquire, why wasn't it done the other way?" James Thorpe. "The world is divided into two types of people, those who love to talk and those who hate to listen." Abigail Van Buren. "There are two types of people, those who walk into a room and say, 'There you are,' and those who walk into a room and say, 'Here I am.'" Cess Bierman. "There are two kinds of people, those who believe in global warming and those who don't." Robert Byrd. "There are two kinds of people, those who finish what they start and..." Finally, the story is told of a newly elected senator who addressed his colleagues by saying, "Half of this Senate are jackasses." After angry shouts and demands for an apology, he grumbled, "All right, I take it back. Half of this Senate are not jackasses." just so nice, reminiscing about Lexington, Kentucky. When I started out in the ministry, I used to had a list of people who could play the piano, and every week I would call them until I could get one to agree to come and accompany the hymns, and that was all the music we had. And this is so wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, back in the fall of 1993, back in the last century, I was the new minister in a Unitarian Universalist church in Bethesda, Maryland, near Washington, D.C. And a young couple came into my office to talk with me. They described how much they liked the church, but then the woman said, "I worked in the White House on Barbara Bush's staff. I get the impression here that everyone in the church is a liberal Democrat. Can a Republican be a Unitarian Universalist?" Well, I told her about one of my heroes, Elliot Richardson. Richardson was a prominent Republican. He is the only individual in the history of our country to serve in 4 cabinet-level positions in the United States government. Richardson was first Richard Nixon's Secretary of Health, Education, and Welfare. Then he served as Nixon's Secretary of Defense, and then Nixon's Attorney General. Later, he was President Ford's Secretary of Commerce. In 1973, Richardson became a national hero during the Watergate scandal when he resigned as Attorney General rather than follow President Nixon's order to fire Special Prosecutor Archibald Cox. But in addition to being a prominent Republican, Elliot Richardson was a lifelong member of First Church, the Unitarian Universalist congregation in Boston's Back Bay, which was established by the Puritans in 1630. He was part of a long tradition of Republican Unitarians. Indeed, during the 19th century, almost all Unitarians were loyal members of Lincoln's Republican Party. And who was the last Unitarian president? This is a quiz, who also served as President of the United States, and then after he finished his service as President of the United States, served as President of the Unitarian Association, and then was appointed as Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, the only person who's ever been President of the United States, President of the AUA, and Chief Justice of the United States. William Howard Taft, a lifelong Unitarian from Cincinnati and a member of All Souls Unitarian Church in Washington, D.C. until his death in 1930. And he used to teach religious education classes at All Souls while serving as Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Imagine what that would have been like. After the Second World War, this started to change. Adlai Stevenson, a Unitarian from Bloomington, Illinois, ran for president as a Democrat. And Unitarian churches in the 1950s became a mixture of Democrats and Republicans. I was 9 years old in 1960, attending a Unitarian religious education program. I remember my mother made the decision to vote for John Kennedy, while my father was leaning in the direction of voting for Richard Nixon. My father looked at Vice President Nixon's background as a Quaker and hoped that Nixon might be less inclined to start a war. In the 1950s, there were so many moderates in both the Democrat and Republican parties that there was little difference between the two. Among mainstream Protestant churches in the 1950s, there was no relationship between church attendance and affiliation with a particular political party. Regular Protestant churchgoers voted both Democrat and Republican, And many, as is also true today, were independents, not a member of either political party. The theologian Paul Tillich complained about this to a class of college graduates. He said, "We hope for nonconformists among you, for your sake, for the sake of the nation, and for the sake of humanity." But this conformity is illustrated by 2 votes in Congress taken in 1965. Half the Republicans in the Senate voted for President Lyndon Johnson's Medicare bill. And following the death of a Unitarian Universalist minister in Selma, many Republicans and Democrats all joined together in passing into law the Voting Rights Act. However, this national consensus gradually started to change. The shift was documented in a book titled The Big Sort, Why the Clustering of Like-Minded America is Tearing Us Apart. In 1976, only 27% of Americans lived in what is called a landslide county, counties that vote either Democrat or Republican by a margin of 20% or more. But by 2008, 48% of Americans lived in a landslide county. And an article last Thursday in the New York Times confirmed that this trend is continuing, based on an analysis of detailed public voter registration records of more than 3.5 million Americans who moved since the last presidential election. It turns out that Republicans tend to move into neighborhoods that President Trump won by an average of 19 percentage points in 2020, while Democrats tend to move to neighborhoods that President Biden won by the opposite margin, also 19 points. Until the 1980s, people with college degrees were evenly distributed among American cities. But after 1980, Americans segregated by education. College-educated liberals clustered in cities like San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Seattle, Oakland, and Boston. According to researchers today, liberals are more likely to listen to national public radio. Liberals are more interested in other cultures and places. Liberals are more likely to engage in individualistic activities and are more optimistic. They subscribe to Netflix and Amazon Prime. Compared to conservatives, liberals, according to research, are more likely to own cats. On the other hand, conservatives are clustered in places like Mesa, Arizona, was identified as the most conservative place in America by one of the researchers, Oklahoma City, Virginia Beach, Colorado Springs, and Jacksonville, Florida. It's just a coincidence that I was born in Mesa, Arizona. Studies show that such clusters of conservatives tend to share many lifestyle choices. They get their news from Fox. They are more likely to own guns. They read sports magazines. They think that overwhelming force is the best way to defeat terrorists. In conservative communities, people are more likely to attend church. They are more likely to participate in clubs, more likely to volunteer in service organizations and city projects. They're more supportive of traditional authority. They are more family-oriented, and they frequently visit relatives. Conservatives express more feelings of economic vulnerability. They experience higher levels of stress. They spend more time in social activities with other people. Conservatives tend to cluster in areas where there is less population density, like Prescott. And compared to liberals, conservatives are more likely to own dogs. This process has transformed American religion. In contrast to the 1950s, when Republicans and Democrats worshiped side by side, today few churches have a mixture of Republicans and Democrats. In a gradual migration, many people in America have physically separated themselves and made lifestyle choices based on liberal and conservative views. Now, this is not all bad. A positive result of this polarization has been an increase in interest in politics. More people have lawn signs and bumper stickers. More people contribute financially to support candidates. On election day, voter turnout has increased. Each major political party has become more organized and efficient at communicating with their bases. Churches, which were torn apart in the 1960s, those of you who remember that time, fighting over whether the Vietnam War was moral or not, fighting about issues of how aggressive we should be in civil rights, dividing churches. Today, churches are more peaceful, with fewer fights about political issues. On the negative side, researchers have observed that like-minded groups not only enforce conformity, but also tend to grow more extreme. As liberals and conservatives separate, we become more zealous and more distrustful of each other. On Facebook entries, my friends tend to post relentless justifications of their liberal positions and constantly ridicule conservative views. Most important to our democracy, because of geographic clustering, we have seen 2 presidential elections in 2000 and again in 2016, where a candidate has won the popular vote but lost the Electoral College. Well, all of this gets me to think about ants. When I was a child in the 1950s, back when there were more Republicans who were members of Unitarian churches, my parents gave me an ant farm as a gift. It was a simple device, a section of sand enclosed by 2 clear plastic windows. It came in the mail with a tube of live ants that were sent through the post office and some ant food. We dumped the ants in the narrow slit between the 2 pieces of clear plastic, and they landed on the sand. And the ants dug tunnels, just like it showed in the illustration on the box. But I was young, and you like to explore different things when you're a child. I decided to experiment. I went outside, and I got some ants from the backyard, and I added them to the ant farm. By the next day, every ant was dead. The new ants and the old ants killed each other. For me, it was an early lesson in polarization. In 1979, Harvard expert on ants, Edward Osborne Wilson, E.O. Wilson, published a book called On Human Nature. He said that out in big fields, when ant colonies grew so large that there was not enough food to feed all the ants, they would go to war with nearby ant colonies. The wars would continue until so many ants died that there was enough food left to feed the remaining ants. Wilson suggested that, like ants, human beings form into colonies. For example, we all are in a colony called the United States. We're in a sub-colony called Arizona, and a sub-colony called Prescott, and one called Unitarian Universalist Congregation. And the most important sub-colony for most of us is our family. Wilson said that, like ants, we fight when we believe that the resources necessary for our colony's survival are threatened. When it comes to government policies, we do not ask, what's in it for me? We ask, what's in it for the United States? What's in it for Arizona? What's in it for Prescott? What's in it for Unitarian Universalists? And most important, what's in it for my family? Justifications people give for their aggressive acts, such as religious differences or political differences, are, in Wilson's view, a veneer that covers the real reason, the perceived fear of the death of our colony due to scarce resources. And the word perception is very important here. In my ant farm, I would have given all the ants enough food. They would not have actual scarcity. They did not need to fight each other. But the ants did not understand this. Wilson argued that when humans believe that we have enough resources, when we believe there is enough for all of us, then we are very comfortable speaking about the inherent worth and dignity of all the people on the earth. However, Wilson argues, when we believe we are running out of resources that are necessary for our survival, phrases such as all people are created equal and the inherent worth and dignity of every person, they become less important and are replaced with talk about the survival of our tribe. In terms of perceived scarcity, we focus on supporting our group, our colony. Some Americans fear sharing our limited resources with immigrants will lead to the end of our country, the end of their tribe. Some Americans fear what has been called Obamacare because medical resources they feel are limited. If we are forced to share our medical care with everyone, we will face long waits for treatment, rationing, and higher costs. If Edward Osborne Wilson is correct, and I think he is, there was less polarization in the 1950s because Americans were united in protecting our country from what people perceived was a common external enemy, international communism. We were one big family working together to protect ourselves from what we imagined was an external threat. And this feeling of unity occurred again, at least for a short time, after September 11th, when again almost all of us united in a fight against an external common enemy. I remember it was remarkable, and about 3 weeks after September 11th in Washington, D.C., where people honked their horns constantly, I heard almost nobody honking their horn. We were all together for a little while. The human animal has evolved to feel a camaraderie when we unite to fight a common enemy. We feel that what we were doing is right and necessary for our group survival. Currently, however, with no agreement about a serious external attack on the United States, we have split into two groups, liberals and conservatives. For liberals, conservatives are the enemy, and for conservatives, liberals and immigrants are the enemy. One member of Congress said, "This is not a collegial body anymore. It is more like gang behavior. Members walk into the chamber full of hate." And of course, like the ants in my ant farm, we are far more likely to survive if we can overcome our evolutionary programming that causes us to form these colonies and fight. Because with planning, there are enough resources for all of us to live together. Decreasing polarization requires an ability to see the situation as the other side sees it. If we want to influence another person, it helps to understand their point of view and feel the emotional force with which they believe it. This goes against our evolutionary programming, which encourages us to focus on the facts that support our point of view and demonize the people with whom we disagree. Still, I try. I try to understand the point of view of those with whom I disagree. I try to imagine affirming the worth and dignity of every person, even when they say or do something that deeply offends me. And I say to my politically conservative friends, let's work together. With planning, there are enough resources for all of us. Now, of course, sometimes others will continue to demonize us, even when we do our best to treat them with dignity and respect. Sometimes all our efforts to decrease polarization will fail. Others are convinced that we threaten their survival. Nothing we do changes that perception. Sometimes the other side will act like the ants in my ant farm and just keep fighting, no matter how hard I work to understand their point of view. Therefore, it's necessary to develop a backup plan. Working for solutions that decrease polarization, that's a good activity, but it is also good to have an alternative backup plan if it doesn't work. In my case, my plan includes contributing money to political candidates. Electing the leaders who share my values is my best alternative. I also make sure that my passport is up to date. Now, I think Prescott is a wonderful place to live, but I've also lived and had work permits in Switzerland, in Australia, in New Zealand, and in Scotland. I know there are alternatives. Still, I do not expect to leave this country. Some days my heart is full of hope that our country can be healed of its division. I suggest this morning that if we want to be a truly diverse religious community, if we want to truly affirm and promote the inherent dignity of every person, we can do so by welcoming and affirming political conservatives who seek us out and wish to be part of our liberal religious community. As they come, I will continue to say, with planning, there's enough resources for all of us to live together. I'm not suggesting that anyone conservative or liberal compromise their beliefs. I'm not suggesting that we avoid talking about political issues. I am suggesting that we welcome and treat with respect people who are different from us politically. I suggest that we try to understand the point of view of others. If we are to see progress in America on the moral issues we care about, conservatives and liberals will need to learn to work together. Let's start by identifying our common human needs, our common human values, and work to make sure that everyone can feel confident about having enough resources to survive, enough resources to live a meaningful life. Back in Bethesda in 1993, the young couple did join the church, and they remained members until they moved away. And I was honored to officiate at the dedication of their new baby. In their case, a Republican family could also be part of a Unitarian Universalist congregation. Over the years, I've talked with others who have asked, can a Republican be a member of a Unitarian Universalist church? Of course, I say, and I explain that Unitarians have a long tradition of being Republicans, going back to the 19th century. Now, I don't know the outcome of the election. Whatever the result, I pray that we liberals and we conservatives will live together in peace. I say to both Republicans and Democrats and independents, we can play a role in decreasing the polarization of our country. It is hard for a liberal to demonize a conservative if the liberal has a conservative as a friend. And it's hard for a conservative to demonize a liberal if the conservative has a liberal as a friend. This, I think, is the American way. And it's the Unitarian Universalist way. Let's try to sing our closing hymn as the words appear on the screen. I invite you to join with me in saying the closing words for the unison reading about the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As president, I'd like to just make a few remarks to bring you up to date about the building plan. There is one piece of very good news, and that is the floodplain maps have been redrawn. We were in a floodplain category, but we are no longer in a floodplain category. Now, that doesn't mean we could never flood, but the statistics suggest it's unlikely. The consequence of that is that there were certain things that we would be forced to do by the city in order to do the project that we are proposing. If the amount of money spent on the renovation was more than 50% of the value of the current value of the property. So we no longer have that restriction. That doesn't mean there are things that we might choose to do, but we won't be forced from a list of things that must be done. So that's number one. Number two is that, as I indicated before, an architect has been hired, has come up with a design that was in fact presented to the city to get feedback from them about what they were, any things that they would expect us to do. That meeting went very well. So we have that information, and the detailed plans are going forward. Now, finally, I would like to make public something that has come up. First of all, the congregation basically agreed to spend a certain amount of money to basically keep the walls at their current height. It turns out, and basically the plan was to put scissor trusses on the current walls, and so that we would have a vaulted ceiling, but the walls would be the same height. It turns out, structurally, that the scissor trusses cannot be put on the current walls for structural reasons. There is no rebar in those block walls, and therefore they would not support the plan to have the vaulted ceiling. Now, there is an advantage of that, in fact. The proposed design with the architect has come up is to basically construct new walls that are going to be interior to the current walls. And those new walls would be stick and be 2x6 form with lots of insulation. That is not a terribly expensive thing to do. And the architect has pointed out that we can add an extra 4 feet with very little extra cost. In other words, we could build the current, have the walls the current height, or we could add a little height and put windows along that upper part. 2 architects have said this would give a much better perspective for the size of the building, to have the whole ceiling a little higher. So the current plan is to, in fact, have the additional 4 feet with some windows along the top. So I would basically just wanted to update everybody on the progress. The project team, the renovation team has been working very hard. The architect is working very hard. They're going back and forth to work out details, and that's where we stand at the present time. Thank you.